I'd like to welcome everyone to the Provo City Council meeting on October the 9th at 5:30 in the City Center Municipal Council Chambers. My name is David Harding. I am Vice Chair of the Council, and I will be chairing the meeting at the request of our Chair, Gary Winterton, who has left to speak to the Provost City School Board. This meeting is being broadcast live on the Provo City Council YouTube channel, where it is also available for on-demand viewing. The council requests that citizens help maintain the decorum of the meeting by turning off electronic devices, being respectful of others, and refraining from outbursts during the proceedings of the meeting. We will begin with a roll call. Mr. Strachan?
Cliff Strachan.
Brian Jones.
George Stewart.
Dave Sewell. George Handley.
David Harding.
Dave Connect.
Kay Van Buren.
Wayne Parker.
And as noted earlier, we're excusing Chair Winterton and I assume, and the mayor as well is at the school board meeting. So we excuse both of them for some very important city business. I should note that we intend to be wrapped up here by 7 o'clock, so the rest of us can go to that school board meeting. So hopefully everything lines up for that to happen. We will have an opening prayer given by Rebecca Black, following which we will be led in the Pledge of Allegiance by Brittany Collier.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we're so thankful that we can be here together today, that we can learn and try to accomplish some good things, and we're thankful for all the blessings that we enjoy, and we ask you to bless us this evening that we can accomplish all that needs to get done. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Everybody, please rise and face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
For our first item of business, I have a letter written by our chair, Gary Winterton, which I will come down to the podium to read. And this is a letter written to our mayor, who is absent, so this will be interesting. So this letter is dated today and is addressed to our Mayor Michelle Kafusi, and I'm sure she'll watch this video afterwards, so she will get the message. Mayor Michelle Kafusi, as you well know, Wayne Parker is the Chief Administrative Officer of the City of Provo and has now ably and professionally served in that role for 15 years. Recently, the International City County Management Association, ICMA, recognized Wayne's 35 years of service to local governments, which has included cities in Utah, Kansas, and Missouri. Wayne has also served our state in the Utah Governor's Office and with the Utah Advisory Council on Intergovernmental Relations. Wayne has long been involved with the Utah League of Cities and Towns and the Utah City Management Association. Notably, he is one of only 11 ICMA credentialed managers in our state. A longtime resident of Provo with his wife, Julie, Wayne earned his Bachelor of Arts and Masters of Public Administration degrees from Brigham Young University and continues to support BYU's MPA program. He has served in his church, in Boy Scouts, and around the community. Wayne has significantly contributed to the well-being of Provo through his leadership, competence, and strength of character. He has been described as a stabilizing influence on the city organization. We have no doubt Wayne's contributions to our city have been impactful, if unsung. The list of accolades grows as Provo has become nationally ranked during his tenure. We, the Provost City Council, want to commend, recognize, and thank Mr. Parker for his excellent service to our community. It's signed by Gary Winterton. If I could ask Mr. Parker and Mrs. Parker to come down. I've only been on the council for a few years, but I have personally seen the steadying hand of Mr. Parker, and his service really has benefited every resident of Provo and really the state as well. And so on behalf of the council, thank you for your service. So we have a framed copy of that letter, as well as a fancy pen, as a small token of our appreciation and the city's appreciation. Yes.
And just some flowers for Julie, since we have him all the time away from you. The mayor's office just wanted to recognize her as well.
We'd like to invite the council to come down. One of those five should take it. Our second agenda item is a presentation of the Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design Standards Award for the Energy Department's building. And this will be presented by Travis Ball, our Energy Department Director.
Thank you, Council Chair. Appreciate this time. And I just want to say one other thing that wasn't said, but Wayne is a great boss too. And that wasn't said. He's a really a good person. So it's been 2 years since we completed our building, and we finally got our award. There's a lot of paperwork associated with this to get a LEED Gold building. But I just want to say we built a sustainable building, and we did it under budget and in time. So, and that's quite an accomplishment. And so in order to kind of go over some of the things that we did for LEED, I'm going to ask Scott Bunker, who's our assistant director and also the project manager over this. He worked hard and diligently to get us this LEED Gold designation.
Good afternoon. I'm grateful to be here. This was, without a doubt, one of the most fun projects I've had the opportunity to work on for the City of Provo, and grateful for this opportunity to share with you a little bit about what we were able to accomplish in the energy building. From the beginning, our charge was to make sure that we're a great example to the community, and so that was something that we took very seriously and wanted to make sure as we went forward in the construction of this building that in every phase of the process that we were able to meet that charge. And so I wanted to cover just real briefly today some of what goes on with the LEED Gold building, because many aren't real familiar with it. Gold is one of the top standards. It's not the most highest standard. It's the one that we were given the charge to try to reach in the construction process of this building. And so as you know, LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And as far as we know, we are the only LEED Gold building in Utah County. And there are only a few statewide that I'm aware of as well. And so this is kind of a big deal for us as we go through this process. In order to get your LEED Gold designation, you have to have a certain points in various areas, and there are 6 specific areas under sustainable sites, energy and atmosphere, indoor environment quality, water efficiency, materials and resources, and innovation in design. And there is a lot that is contained in each one of those categories that we went through, and we had to meet certain standards in all through the entire construction and demolition phase. I'm only going to cover and highlight some of the ones that we thought were the best and that we were really proud of. Excuse me. Under the first area of sustainable sites, one of the things that we're most proud of is the fact that we are very obviously close where we decided to settle with the building being built right in the heart of Provo. We're close to any UTA and Utah Valley Express access. We had multiple bike racks installed in the building and showers and changing rooms in order to encourage our employees to bike and walk to work and to encourage that kind of activity. We've also provided bikes for our employees outside in front of the building so that they have meetings down at the other city buildings throughout the city, they can actually ride the bikes there rather than working, and those are utilized on a constant basis. Another area that we were very proud of is water efficiency. On the exterior, especially for our xeriscaping, we get a lot of accolades and compliments about the landscaping around the building, and it is beautiful. The architect did a great job, and we're very happy with it. But we were able to reduce our water usage almost 39% below what a building of our average size should require for watering. And a lot of that is due to the xeriscaping that's around the building. In the building, the building was obviously built with a lot of up-to-date modern water features that can reduce the use of water throughout the buildings and the toilets and the sinks, et cetera. And so we tried to encourage that throughout the building as well. As far as also inside the building, in regards to the energy and atmosphere category, one of the things that we wanted to make sure that we included was that we had a lot of windows in this building, and that was so we could do what's called natural daylight harvesting. And so as the sun comes up and there's enough natural light that's coming into the building, then the lights inside the building dim and adjust according to how much natural light is available. And so as you're in our building and you're in some of the meetings, you will see lights dimming and coming on and off at various stages because they're adjusting to that natural lighting as it comes in through the buildings and through those natural windows. It has occupancy controls in the various offices as well throughout the building, so they can tell when the office is being utilized, so they can adjust the lighting as well as some of the temperature controls in the rooms also. Obviously throughout the building we have a lot of LED fixtures, but we also have a lot of skylights in our garage bays and in our warehouse, and throughout the building a lot of skylights to also allow in a lot of natural lighting also. And then also solar panels. We get about 125 kilowatts of power generated. It's about 25% of our usage in the building from the solar panels that are on some of the parking canopies that cover a lot of our equipment and our trucks. We also installed a charging station to charge our Chevy Volt that we have there in the building as well, and that charging station is used all the time. We also have had the opportunity to sponsor charging stations throughout the city. So we've installed one at the library, one here at the City Center, and one at the Rec Center also for people to utilize for charging their electric cars also. And then another component, and this wasn't part of our building project, but one, as you know, we're very proud of, is our new power plant that is much cleaner, much quieter, and definitely much more efficient than the old power plant that was there. And another category that we're really proud of is the materials and resources. In the demolition of the process of not only the power plant and the smokestacks in our admin building, we were able to recycle 83% of all of the waste that came out of those buildings, which to us was huge. That's 294.67 tons of material that was recycled. That included all the metal, all the wood, all the aluminum, all the steel, all the concrete, all the bricks throughout the building. And it was quite a process. That's why the demolition of the buildings took a little longer than maybe normally, because they had to separate each one of those categories out. We were also very happy that as part of this process, we got a lot of credit for the fact that we used construction materials, especially the steel and metal framing and the carpet and ceiling tiles, that were all made of recycled materials, which was very important to us. Some of the other materials we wanted to get recycled was very hard to come by. Ironically, there's not a lot of them out there, but we got as much as we possibly could. And then also we tried to buy as much locally as we also could as well. So there was quite a few materials that are built in the design of the building that we bought locally. Indoor environment and quality, we talked about the windows and the views and the light. A lot of natural light coming in the office spaces. Almost every office in the building is on an exterior wall and has a window to allow in that natural space and provide a much more comfortable environment for our employees. And then of course the ventilation and filtration systems are the best that were out there on the market at the time that the building was built. And so that helps with the indoor environment quality as well. So the building that we're very proud of, we're grateful that we finally got our award after 2 years, but we just wanted to share it with you because it's an important part of the process for us. So thank you very much. Any questions?
I just want to say I personally find this very exciting that Provo has built such a sustainable building to this standard, to the LEED Gold standard, and is a leader in the county by being the first one to achieve that standard. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We're proud of it.
And you left out one of the critical design elements where the key like command centers on the second floor, and why?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. All of our critical infrastructure is built up on the second level of the building. That was another important part of having it 2 stories, was to be able to utilize the space much better and in the community as well. But mostly because as we did some research after some major hurricanes hit the East Coast, power companies, their biggest problem in being able to respond to those emergencies was all their critical infrastructure, all their IT services, all their emergency response services were always in the basement of their building, their dispatch center. And so we found it important to make sure that we put all those services on the second story of our building. We have a generator up on that second story as well that can keep that whole floor operational during a big event, so we can still respond to an outage should something happen in a worst case scenario, which was an earthquake hitting and then the dam being breached at Deer Creek. So yeah, thank you, Dave.
George?
Well, we not only have a gold building, we have a platinum department.
Thank you, yes.
Paying over $8 million a year to the general fund through efficient management and great employees. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Mr. Hendley?
Yeah, I just want to echo the congratulations. I think it's a really important step, and I think it's fabulous that this has happened, and hopefully we've learned something as a city too in terms of our new request for funding for a new public fire, police, and city facilities that hopefully can also set a similar example in terms of energy efficiency and
Absolutely.
operation and maintenance costs that are low, so that the building lasts for a very long time, and one that also doesn't have all of the needed services in the basement like we currently do.
Absolutely.
So thank you very much. I think it's really, really wonderful.
Thank you. And just one last item real quick, we just remind you on October 18th, we're having a big meeting with all the citizens that want to come and join us and talk with us about sustainability and environmental stewardship, especially as it relates to generation and where we get most of our power from. So you're welcome to come to that.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, that sounded like the trifecta: award-winning, on time, and under budget. And hopefully we've demonstrated responsibility to our citizens that will allow them to trust us in future endeavors as well. We have now hit the public comment portion of our meeting. I will turn to our counsel, Mr. Jones, and ask him to recite the preamble.
Happy to do so. As indicated on the screen, a required public hearing will be held for certain agenda items prior to council action. After each such item has been presented, time to comment will be provided for all those who wish to speak. For items that do not require a public hearing, public comment will still be taken following presentation of the item, but will be limited to 10 minutes. At this time, 15 minutes have been set aside for an open public comment period, which is intended to allow comment on matters that do not appear on the agenda. Persons who speak during this time to an item that is on the agenda will not normally be afforded a second opportunity to speak during the comment period specific to that item. During any public comment period, each speaker will generally be limited to 2 minutes. Additional time may be given to individuals specifically invited to speak, such as applicants, neighborhood chairs, or others that may be representing additional persons. Please begin your comments by stating your name and city of residence. Due to state noticing requirements, no formal action will be taken in this meeting on matters that do not appear on the agenda. I would also note, I don't think we added this to the preamble yet, but our first 2 agenda items where it says that they are for the consent agenda, the way the consent agenda works is that the council approves or has the opportunity to approve both those items without any discussion and without any comment. So if you have anything to add to either of those items, this would also be the time to speak to those two items.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. And we'll turn the time over to the public.
Good evening. Thank you, council members and staff and public here in Provo City. My name is Ben Stanley. I'm from Pleasant Grove, Utah. I am one of 2 nominees for Utah and Tooele counties to serve on our Utah Transit Authority Board of Trustees. And so I've told the governor's office and friends at UTA who would like to see me receive that appointment that I will be making a tour of Consensus Building, visiting with mayors and councils and introducing myself and answering any questions. Provo is a city that's very near and dear to my heart. I graduated from BYU and stayed for law school and graduated magna cum laude from the J. Reuben Clark Law School as well. I met a beautiful woman who was studying chemistry and physics, and we ended up sticking around and finishing law school at the Y as well. So this city is very important to me. It's, of course, the largest city in either Tooele or Utah County. And as I strive to encourage mayors and elected officials across our counties to get behind one of our two nominees to support the importance of representation, we're kind of in the 11th hour. A little bit about my background. Following my graduation, I began my career in Chicago working for the same law firm that Dallin H. Oaks and Brett Kavanaugh and a number of other, Jeffrey Rose, and a lot of legal luminaries worked. There I represented United Airlines when they were struggling in the aftermath of the September 11th terrorist attacks, losing $2 billion a year. I helped rescue them from Chapter 11 bankruptcy and was a leader on that team. And so I have experience with transportation clients, experience with multi-billion-dollar budgets, which appealed to our county commissioners, and they nominated two individuals as required by a Senate bill that was passed this year, Senate Bill 136. I'm one that sees the value and essential nature of transportation. I'm an advocate of UTA. I'm an advocate of solving our transportation needs. In the next 35 to 50 years, we're going to have a lot of congestion if we don't make transit work. But I am a fiscal conservative who would like to make sure that the scandals of UTA are in its past. And so I would love to have your support. I would love to answer any questions people may have about why I was nominated. The nominees are the appointees. There will be 3 under the Senate bill who will take office November 1st, but there is yet to be an appointment for Utah or Tooele counties. And so there was enough hesitancy based on various questions that were raised that I'm encouraging elected officials to speak up and to get behind one of our nominees, ideally me. I can't stick around for your entire meeting. I'm going to do the same kind of presentation in Orem, but if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, with that, we will close the public comment portion of the meeting, and we will move forward with our consent agenda. The consent agenda is intended to quickly handle agenda items that may not require further discussion because they are routine or have been fully vetted in other meetings. On the consent agenda is a joint resolution of the Provo City Mayor and Municipal Council appointing temporary Justice Court judges for the Provo City Justice Court, and a resolution reappointing Bob Connor as the Provo City Constable to serve a 4-year term. Does any council member have wishes to pull either of these items off the consent agenda? Seeing none, I call for a vote to collectively approve the consent agenda items. All in favor? And that was unanimous. So on to item 5. This is an implied motion on an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 5.89 acres of real property generally located at 1437 East, 2300 North, from public facilities to agricultural 1, that being A11, and this is in the Rock Canyon neighborhood. This presentation will be led by Aaron Ardmore of Provo City Planning.
Thank you. If we can bring up the slides from last time. Oh, thank you. So just as a refresher, you saw this 2 weeks ago. So it's the property up here along 2300 North as you go to the Rock Canyon Trailhead. The applicant had proposed to rezone this property so they could develop it into 3 separate building lots for single-family residential units. And there were some hardships with the site. They've got some fault lines and some other contours here that make it difficult for building on a majority of the land. So the idea is to build a single-family home here, here, and here. They chose to use the agricultural 1 zone just as a kind of a refresher, so they could maintain just the 3 lots. So with the A1.1, that's a minimum of 1 acre lot. They've laid this out so each lot is just under 2 acres. So under that zone, if it was approved, the lots couldn't be further subdivided. And that was the intent of that. And last time, if you remember, it was continued due to discussion about animal rights. The applicant has proffered a development agreement to limit all those animal rights, but for 2 horses per lot and chickens if the residents of the future homes there would like to maintain those rights on the property. So there's a proposed development agreement with this rezone request. Other than that, if you have any questions again for me, I'll try to answer those.
Are there any questions? Councilman Stewart?
I'm assuming they want the animal rights so they can have the horses.
Yeah, so they want the option. They don't know if there's going to be horses, but they would like the option to hold a couple horses if.
Is that suitable for a residential neighborhood?
Again, so they're asking for agricultural zone.
But it's residential all around it, at least on the south side, at least on the west side. Could you bring the map up again?
Trying to go back, sorry. It's not really working for me. No help. Can we, Bryce, or, sorry. Can you go back a slide? Oh, there you go. No, that's perfect. Go back to that. All right. So yeah, to the west and to the south, it's R110 zoning. The general plan for the proposed site is residential, and it would be residential use, similar
Horses
to.
aren't residential use, are they?
Say what?
Horses aren't a residential use.
In RA, they're residential use. They're proposing a A.
To me, it doesn't seem suitable to be putting horses in that area so close to residential, but.
And
get a chance
to address
vote
that,
on
I don't know if that's their intent to put a bunch of horses back there. Their intent is to build 3 single-family homes.
Six horses is a bunch.
Right.
They could put 6 horses, right?
Technically, they could.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question about, having read the proffer, I believe I understand the request for the horses. The chickens I wasn't as clear on, because in Provo City, if residential lots meet certain requirements, they can have chickens already. So is this request are they just saying that we don't want to give up rights to chickens, or do they want additional rights that a regular residential area wouldn't have, but an agricultural area would have?
You'd have to ask the applicant
Okay.
that. I don't have those details.
Okay, thank you.
You bring up a good point. Every residence with the right size yard can have chickens, but in an agricultural zone, I don't think that has the same limitations of, 6 chickens or whatever our number limitation is. And so if they keep that right to have chickens in the agricultural zones, it could be who knows how many. So that's a good question.
Okay. Mr. Sewell.
Just to follow up on that same line, Mr. Jones, would you happen to know the difference in what is allowed in regards to chickens in a residential zone versus an A1.1 zone?
Sure. And the one complication probably for the applicant is that the way our chicken ordinance is written, it only allows chickens in residential zones. So if the property is agricultural and not residential, then the chicken ordinance wouldn't actually apply. So if they don't reserve some agricultural chicken rights, they would have no chicken rights at all. Does that make sense? Although we could probably tweak the development agreement to grant them the same as the residential. So in residential, it's based on the size of the parcel. A lot, 10,000 square feet can have up to 6, 9,000 up to 5, 8,000 up to 4, 7,000 up to 3, and 6,000 up to 2. In an agricultural zone, though, the only limit would be agricultural industry standards. So you could, in theory, and under the current draft of the development agreement, you could, in theory, run a chicken farm on the property.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Ardmore? All right, we will open this item for public comment. Again, if you will come to the podium.
Neighborhood chair.
Thank you very much.
Applicant.
Thank you very much. We will begin with turning the time over to the applicant for a presentation and questions from the council. So Mr. Gardner is approaching. Thank you very much. And after Mr. Gardner, we will go to the neighborhood chair and then open it up generally for the public. Mr. Gardner.
Thank you. My name is Dave Gardner. I'm representing the property owners on this situation. The reason we did the chickens was because if we are granted the resident or the agricultural zone, there wouldn't be a limitation. So, and the chickens are totally unimportant, but if that was something that we needed to remove entirely and prohibit, we're willing to do that. The other thing is, it's ironic in this situation because intent for horses is only part of the year. Probably the worst part of the year is the summer, but if we included in our proffer that it would be only for 3 months of the year, and we're willing to do that as well. This is not intended to be an agricultural use. This is intended to be a gentleman farm type operation where you just have a couple of horses. They don't want any other animals. They did talk about some chickens, but so that's why we threw that in. But there was no enthusiasm for the chickens. So the property is now zoned public facility. It was previously owned by the Forest Service. We have done a layout on the property. If we take it into an R110 zone, which is the same zone as next door to us, we could get 14 lots without much trouble. We could probably design it to get 16 lots. And that's not what they really want. So that if there's additional proffers we can offer, we can bring up, we're happy to discuss that.
Thank you. Mrs. Luke?
I'm Rachel Luke. I'm the neighborhood chair for Rock Canyon neighborhood. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you for allowing me to go back to the neighborhood and encouraging me to get feedback. It turned out to be more of an issue than I thought it was going to be. So prior to being developed into Rock Canyon Temple Estates, which is just directly south of this parcel, they had horses on the easternmost part of the property. There's a history of horses being where that condo development was. And neighbors at that time complained to the city council and requested that the area be rezoned into residential. And the owners of the horses and the property, their names are Howard and Deanna Francis, they agreed to remedy the issue. These same owners have contacted me and given feedback that horses should not be permitted to be allowed in the neighborhood again. So this area has had history with agricultural zoning in the past, and it failed not to be impactful to surrounding neighbors. This parcel borders Rock Canyon Park and is situated close to the Rock Canyon trailhead. The council spoke today about preservation of this jewel of Provo. Residents of Provo enjoy this area to a great degree, and so impacts that are bordering this area should be closely vetted. We have picnic pavilions, volleyball courts, trails, grassy areas that could all be impacted negatively by a smaller horse property. Your average 1,000-pound horse produces 50 pounds of waste a day. 6 horses would be 300 pounds of waste a day. Given that this parcel is up on a mountainside, when it rains, the groundwater will likely be contaminated from the horses and will go down to other residents and the park.
At the last meeting, I described a parcel off of Timpview in our neighborhood that has a current grandfathered horse property. And I know many neighbors, myself included, enjoy having a neighborhood petting zoo. But I decided to ask a friend who used to live right by that property how she felt about the horses. And I was surprised to hear that horses were part of the reason that they moved to a home further down the road. Dust, smells, and bugs were all confirmed as being contributing factors to their relocation. I put this issue up before 120 residents on our email list, 280 on our Facebook group. In addition to that, I put up 50 flyers on all bordering neighbors, including some who live in the Oak Hills neighborhood, as this parcel borders both neighbors, so 2300 North is a dividing boundary between our two neighborhoods. No one had been apprised of the intent to have horses, and it was not raised at the Planning Commission meeting. The majority of bordering neighbors have not given favorable responses to having horses. 2 families next to the parcel have come back with stipulations that the horses be placed on the 2 eastern plots and that the most western one be zoned residential, as that is the lot that borders their properties. They've also noted some concerns about fencing and grading, which I've passed along to the council via email. 22 residents, most bordering the parcel, have emailed or called me stating they do not want any horses at all. 12 residents further away from the parcel voted in a Facebook poll as being in favor of a neighborhood farm. 3 non-bordering residents voted in the same poll that they have concerns about the quantity and placement. Rock Canyon Temple Estates has many older residents who have allergies and asthma, along with other respiratory issues. They have concerns as to how the horses will affect their quality of life. Many of the people who have contacted me have extensive experience with horses. I've heard from several ranchers and farmers who are aware of the impacts that a smaller horse property would pose in a residential area. They don't have an aversion to horses, quite the opposite, they love them. But they know from experience that this might not be an ideal location for it. In closing, the purpose and objective of the agricultural zoning sought here is stated, quote, to be designed and intended to protect agricultural uses from encroachment of urban development until such a time as residential, commercial, or industrial uses in such areas become necessary and desirable. Close quote. This zoning request does not match the objectives of this zone because it's already residential. There's no encroachment here, and it is also abutting 2 well-used public facility properties, the park and the trailhead. At this point, we're not trying to protect agricultural uses. We're asked to implement them into an urban setting where there is already established residential use. I just want to go on record that I'm not anti-horse. I grew up with horses. We had 6 of them on 17 acres in rural Canada. So I'm sure the owners are lovely too. I had some feedback that I had an agenda here, which I don't. I'm just relaying what our neighborhood has stated. Do I have any questions?
I just want to thank you for that very thorough report. That's extremely helpful, and you've done a lot of work to get that information to us, and I think it's very relevant, so thank you.
No problem. Anyone else?
You have proved the value of a neighborhood chair.
I'm trying.
Incredible job. Thank you so much.
I just have to say also thank you, Rachel, as you've shown previously and again in this, you're very diligent in representing your neighbors, and we really appreciate that.
Thank you.
So with that, we will open the podium to the public. If you would like to speak to the council on this item, please come forward now, state your name, and please keep your comments to 2 minutes.
My name is James Patrick Kelly. My home looks onto this property. My home is on 2300 North. My bedroom window, my dining room window, my bedroom window. I'm opposed to having horses there. I understand the willingness to have buildings of homes. I would certainly not be opposed to a home, although I do enjoy having the greenery to look on now. But I would be opposed to having horses be allowed that close to our home, both for the smell, the bugs, and the problems that exist.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ellis Nuttall, and I live at 14, just right on 1430 East, which is right in front of the eastern part where some people said, oh, it'd be okay as long as they're on the eastern end. Well, I'm sorry, but I really love horses. I just don't think I want to live among them. And the problem that we're looking at is one of what horses smell like. I have a brother who lived in a place, and they agreed to allow horses come in front of them, and they ruled the day that they ever agreed to that. It was something that not all days, but when the wind is just right, the smell of those horses is something that's very disagreeable. Our next door neighbor lives just between Pat and me. Has an allergy. She would have to move away if there were animals like that around. And she's 97 years old. I'd hate to have to force this lady to move. But again, if we had known that there were going to be horses there when we bought the property, then shame on us. We would have to live with that. But to have it introduced into a residential neighborhood where there was never any expectation of such, it seems that that's just not the right way to do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brent Ashworth, our property, my wife Charlene and I, borders on the property in question. And I am concerned about horses being that close to our property. I don't know that it's appropriate in a residential area that's already been mapped out with homes and multiple housing and so on. And I am aware of the allergy problem with horses. I'm not against horses, although I never met a horse that liked me. But I do wonder about the appropriateness of having them in, next to our homes there.
Thank you.
I'm Carolyn Driggs, a longtime resident of the City of Provo, and I live up in the Rock Canyon Temple Estates area, and I am opposed to having this made into an agricultural area because this is a residential area surrounded by wonderful homes, and I think if you're open up access to animals. They say horses, but you could have llamas and lambs and sheep and pigs and chickens and whatever. And we are in a residential area, and this is a pristine area going up into the Rock Canyon Park or area, surrounded by the beautiful Rock Canyon Park, which is a very active area. And it just seems rather inappropriate to open it up to agricultural area. And so I'm very much opposed to it. I think we have the beautiful temple. We have a home that has been built over across the street from us, and it is on 2 acres, and they have landscaped it into a lovely, lovely area. And I think this area proposed here for agriculture, I think it should be a residential area with 3 lovely homes with beautiful surrounding areas that make it a nice, pristine entrance into our Rock Canyon Park. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other comment?
Julia Nielsen, and I'm just right across the street, a little bit to the east, and I heard from the west side that they don't want the horses, or at least the first property on the west, to have horses. I'm a little bit to the east, and I don't want them a little bit to the east either. I have allergies, my son has allergies, and my grandkids have allergies, and we use, some of them use asthma medicine, and it would be more of a health problem than anything. But I do not care to have the flies and the stench or the animals that close. And I'd appreciate also not having it agricultural. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, my name is Martha Cox Ballantyne. I'm a new owner of the Edward Kimball House at 2277 North, 1450 East. I'm opposed to this, but I wonder, are we between skill and Charybdis on this? Because if we don't get the 3 houses and the 6 horses, do we get 14 or 16 other houses? Is that really a good question? I would like that answered, but I am definitely opposed to the flies. I have a jar full of bugs I was going to bring and shake in your distinguished faces, but I restrained myself. We don't want the horses in that neighborhood. And besides, next to me, the address at 2255 is approximately $2 or $3 million brand new house, and I don't think they want agricultural zoning across the street from them either. I didn't find out, but I don't. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Henry Hylison, and I live at 1258 East, 2300 North, which is just a little west of this property, but still on the 2300 North. I'm the president of our association, which represents 19 units. I am not here representing them, because I know we actually have some people who would feel the horses would be fine. We have others who are completely against it, which you've already heard from. But I think one of the considerations you have is the city has invested a lot of money in buying that trailhead. We ought to be thinking about making that into a very attractive place to have better parking. When we have holidays, people are parking all over the place trying to find a place to park. We ought to have a better thing that attracts people to come to that trailhead. It's a beautiful place. We ought to think about parks and landscaping and things like that. I don't think that horses will add to that particular attractiveness. I know that some people have said, you know, we have an ordinance that requires people to pick up after their dogs, but they don't have to pick up after their horses. And I don't know if you are acquainted with horses, but they drop a lot and they're very messy. And I can see that starting to have an impact on that area if they are used there and actually housed there. So I would strongly urge you to make that a residential zoning and not an agricultural.
Any other public comment? If not, we will close the public comment portion, bring it back to the council for discussion. If it's all right, I'm going to lead out on this. But my comments are not so much for the council, but for the applicant and for the neighbors that are here. There was some talk about, I thought I took a note, but I didn't. There was some talk about, you know, wouldn't it be nice, really great landscaping, 3 residential homes, no horses, just some great landscaping. The decision that I feel that's before me is do we rezone some land that right now is zoned public facilities, do we rezone it agricultural, even though the plan calls for residential? And so if there's neighborhood opposition to going to agriculture and agricultural and specifically the horse use, I feel like I can respect that because the long-range plan had been for residential. But I think the residents need to be aware that the landowner has rights, and the plan is for this to be residential, most likely R110. And so it is very possible that this could be, if the prospective residents here, feel strongly about having horses, they may have to locate somewhere else. And so this land would likely be developed for other owners, other residents, and it likely, it could easily become 14 or 16 units. I don't know about the slope and all of that stuff, but if the plan, and so maybe there are some limitations because of the site, but with the plan calling for it to be residential, if a developer comes in and says, here are my plans, it's to use this residentially, I would have a hard time saying no, because that's what's in the plan. And so just be aware that this may not be 3 residences with horses or 3 residences without horses. It may be 3 residences with horses or higher density. So just be aware that sometimes the plan that's before us isn't ideal, but may be better than alternatives. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and I'm not sure where we're going to get by the end of this item. There's been some talk about possible other proffers, and so I'm interested to see where this goes. But I just want to make sure everyone in the audience is aware of that.
The topography of the property is not going to allow 14 homes. I mean, they might get 5 or 6 homes on there, but I think we have someone, Kay could probably tell us more how many homes we might be able to get on that property, but certainly not the maximum number that would be allowed under the zone.
Thank you for that clarification. Appreciate it. Mr. Handley.
Well, it seems, I don't know if Mr. Gardner is prepared to give an answer to this, but it seems to me that the neighborhood wants the 3 homes, welcomes them, in fact. I think that seems like a very positive outcome for the community, but there's obviously clear opposition to the idea of horses, so it's just not clear in our minds whether or not that's a non-negotiable issue with the owners, and if so, I think Mrs. Valentine brought this issue up, and Mr. Harding as well, that we might be looking at a very different scenario if that's the case, and that might help us know what we're deciding here.
Well, first off, I didn't mention the number of homes that we could get on there as a threat. I mentioned it as information, and I did the layout myself, so I'm very comfortable we can get 14 lots. The horses, that's not, for the limited amount of time that they would have horses there, if they had their ideal situation, it's not enough time that I don't think I could sit down with them and work that out so that they didn't have any horses. But what they would want to do is have some outbuildings. The primary reason for agricultural, in my way of thinking, was that in a residential zone, your accessory building, the accessory building has to be smaller than the main house. So if we could have an accessory building in the agricultural zone that's larger than the house, which would be, like a barn, but in this case, it wouldn't be a barn. But if we had that option, I think that the horses issue would get them to go someplace else. They've got a facility on North Canyon Road right now that's kept up. The problem is you can't always guarantee it'll be the same owners. 10 years from now, you could have different owners and you could have a problem. But if we could come up with an agricultural zone and proffer that we would have no animals, nothing, not even chickens, I'm not sure I can pull that off, but I think I can.
So I would say that they should have at least the same rights as every other surrounding property, and the other R110 and R18 PD to the west have certain rights with chickens and rabbits, just like any other residential house. And it is limited, as we heard from Brian, And so I wouldn't, when you say no rights at all, no agricultural rights as per the agricultural zone, but they would still, in my mind, have the residential rights for a few animals that a residential zone would have.
Okay, I'm just saying that those animal rights are not all that important to them.
Okay.
So, I mean, there may be more discussion, but just clarifying, so in your mind, would it be better, well, I guess without the proffer, I guess we can't move forward, so we would likely need to continue this
Right.
and see what the applicant would be willing to
Yeah,
proffer.
and because I don't want, this is not something I have cleared with my client, so I'm talking out of school here.
Yeah. Mr. Stewart.
I'm not in favor of continuing it because if it's going to be agriculture, it's going to be put to uses that aren't compatible with the residential neighborhood. We heard from the neighborhood chair what could be done in a residential zone, why you would have it. There's no reason to have this residential, given why we usually give residential. We give agriculture to protect we give agriculture to protect agricultural. So I don't know why we would continue. I think we have enough information. I'd like to vote on it personally.
Okay.
I'm ready. There's nothing they can proffer that would allow me to vote for agriculture. I mean, it's a waste of, in my mind, a waste of time.
Mr. Handley.
Yeah, I think I'm inclined to vote for agricultural if you're essentially not, I mean, it seems like the only reason to zone it as agricultural is to make sure that we're only getting 3 houses. Is that
Right.
correct?
Yeah.
So I'm actually interested to know if the owners are willing to just have the 3 houses, have some chickens like other residential areas, but no horses. I would vote for that.
That's what I would like
That's
to.
what I hear the neighborhood saying they want. And I'm a little worried about making a decision now without getting that feedback from the owner, because I want to make sure that because I don't want this to backfire into 14 homes.
Right. Well, and if I could get that time, I can clarify that. And I may get fired and someone else might be here next week.
Well, and
That
I don't
would be
know. I don't
okay.
know if it's a moot point, and maybe it's already happened. But the report that Rachel Luke gave, I think, would be valuable information to the owners. I thought that was an extraordinarily thorough and thoughtful and objective report that I think would give them an idea of what kind of a. I mean, I think most reasonable people don't. They want what they want, but they also don't want to move into a situation where everyone resents them once they're there. So hopefully, if they have a picture of that, they'll see that it's not an ideal situation to push for the horses.
Mr. Van Buren?
I'm a little, as this was first presented at our last council meeting, the reason it was requested for a agricultural zone is to keep it from being subdivided in greater than 3 lots, I think. And then in the midst of our discussion, it came up that there would be horses also. I think that's what kind of opened the gate on the objections. And I was a little disappointed that that wasn't part of the discussion, that we wanted agriculture because we want horses, not that we wanted agriculture because we don't want to limit the size of the lots. And so now we're kind of trying to get past that horse thing and say, well, let's just eliminate the horses, eliminate animal rights, but keep it agricultural so that we can get a barn, or we can meet the zoning that says the buildings can't be bigger than the original house. And my question is, isn't there a way to zone it residential? The owners can divide it into 3 lots. They don't need to divide it into 14 lots. And then if they want a barn, I think we have ways to get variances that can do that. Is that, I mean, I'm looking to planning for that a little bit.
Sure, that could happen initially. But what would happen when the ownership changes hands is if there's R110 zone on it, they could come and subdivide the property.
Okay, then let's just take that. We've made R110 a real evil thing. Well, the surrounding houses, that just one little area is R110, the rest are R18. And so I don't know why we're kind of threatening that R1 R110 with 14 lots is an evil thing.
I'm not trying to
Those
use
are
that as a
larger
threat.
lots than a lot of the city. And so, I mean, it's,
I'm just stating the facts, what could happen.
and so I don't know why we're kind of weighing that against it. Well, if we don't do this, then we're going to get 14 lots, R110. Well, those are very nice lots and bigger than a lot of the lots of the people that are there. And I don't disagree with you, Dave, but I think it'd be really hard to get 14 lots there. And I haven't studied it near like you have because of the faults and because of the slope of the land. I think it'd be a real stretch to do that. And legally, you probably could, but I don't know that someone would want to. And so that threat of saying either or, we got to decide this because either if we don't do this, we're going to get this. Well, getting the other is not an evil, bad thing. So I'm feeling like I hate to introduce agricultural zoning in a residential area. I've spent a number of hours fighting the other way where we're putting residential in agriculture, and then we have pigs that are attacking the kids who live there. And I just don't want to get that mix going again. It's residential, and to take it back now to agriculture for those couple of reasons where I think there's some other ways to get those things accomplished. I'm kind of feeling I'm with Georgia. I'd like to just go ahead and vote tonight.
Mr. Stewart?
Kay articulated better than I could, but it can be R10 and they can put three houses on the lots. And there's nothing to prevent them, but if we do agricultural, there's all kinds of mischief that could happen. And I agree also that you could have a variance. Why would you want a barn without horses? You have a barn because you have horses. If they don't have horses, they're not going to have a barn. That's a fallacious argument that they want to build some big barn bigger. That would be normally because they want horses. There could be another reason, but normally that's because they want horses.
Mr. Sewell. Okay.
So I think the neighbors have expressed clear reservations about having horses, so I would not be inclined to favor an agricultural zone that would allow that, especially when the current plan is called for residential. I too am struggling a little bit to understand why we need to zone it agricultural. I would prefer to zone it R110, and I don't have any reservations about the density as has been expressed. R110 is practically the lowest, one of the lowest density zones that we have in the city, so I wouldn't be concerned about the number of houses. So from my standpoint, we could either go with the R110, or if there's some reason why that won't accomplish the objectives, and there's a prohibition on the horses, then that would be, for me, a fallback.
So, Mr. Jones, if you could help me out here a little bit, I'm kind of seeing, I apologize. Let's go here first. Mr. Connect, and then I've got a question for you.
So actually, I had something for Mr. Jones also. So our lowest residential zone is R120 currently, I believe.
I believe that's, I'd have to look, but I think that's right. Aaron probably knows more than, yeah.
Okay. So somebody could put R120 on there, and the owner could, at their own volition, put on a deed restriction that ran with the property saying that the lots as laid out on this date, whatever the plat map is signed, shall not ever be subdivided. They could put a deed restriction on.
Right. It could be done that way or through development agreement. One of the special conditions of a development agreement could be waiving a right to subdivide.
Right, and frankly, if I did it in a development agreement, I'd want it on the deed also, but and then, you know, to me, the term barn, if you're not having any animals, is basically just a big garage or a big outbuilding where you might have your boats, your RVs, or whatever, and they can get pretty big. And so, you know, depending on the height and the size and all that, it might be difficult to build something like that under the usual restraints. So I would be interested in hearing what they might come back with. We've heard from the residents, and I think the neighborhood chair made a great presentation. And if it was an RA, with absolutely no animal rights over and above what a normal residential unit would have, then the only thing they would gain, well, I guess there would be two things. It wouldn't be subdividable with that zone. And secondly, they could have a larger garage or outbuilding without perhaps jumping through some of the hoops or being stymied by our regulations. So I don't know if we want to hear from anyone else, if we want to bring the neighborhood chair back up and ask a question, but I personally would like to give this more time to see what could be proffered by the applicant. I think that would be fair.
Mr. Van Buren?
Just to follow up what Mr. Connect just said, I think we've got a motion here that says let's change it from a PF to an A11, and your proposal is to not an A11, right? Didn't you say R?
I'd be okay with an A11, but if there's I'm just saying there's possible other solutions, including deed restrictions or other zones that might accomplish the same thing. So I'm not against an A1, but I am if it presents problems with animal rights, because that's clearly not acceptable.
But it's going to come back to us natural anyway, unless they just decide not to do anything and stays a PF, right? Well,
if we turn it down, they have to start over. I'm saying we could continue it.
So that was my question for Mr. Jones. So there's kind of three options that I see before the council this evening. First, we could rezone A11 with the proffered agreement, and after hearing from the neighborhood and from the comments from the council, I believe that that's not an option that we'd be willing to go for. But that's one option that we could do. Second, we could continue this item and see what agreement could be proffered in the future. A third option would be just to deny the request, and it would need to start over. And I guess and then the fourth one, and here's the question: I feel like that's what it should be, and then the owner can do what they want with it with that zone. Is that within our prerogative, or would we need to renotice or go through?
Under state code, you are required on a zoning decision to have a recommendation from the Planning Commission, but you don't have to follow the recommendation from the Planning Commission, and you can do other things. State code's a little bit vague about what they mean when they say can do other things. The position that the city has always taken in the past is that if you have a recommendation from the Planning Commission for a certain density and you want to change it to something less dense, then you can do that without going back to the Planning Commission, because they've already considered a higher density. But we have our position in the past has been, if you want to change it to something more dense than what the Planning Commission has considered, then they need to consider it again, because they haven't considered all the implications of the higher density.
Okay, so at this point, just for the council, it seems that we have the option to approve what's been offered. We could deny it. We could continue it. Or
I guess there's two options. There's two options for the continuance, right? I mean, one option is a continuance, which is just a period of time to see what comes back, right? The other option is a continuance, which is really intended to not make them start over, where you're saying, we're continuing this with the direction that you go back to the Planning Commission and get there, that if you want, if there's an acceptable alternative to you that is a higher density, go vet that with the Planning Commission and come back to us when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. So my preference would be to do the first continuance and see what would be proffered. I do want to mention that the founder of the company I work for, the late Dr. Bill Pope, occasionally had the employees over to a house he owned in Hobble Creek Canyon, and they had a barn, and there was a swimming pool and basketball courts inside. And so I do think there may be reasons why people would want larger outbuildings that would not be allowed under our R. And And if we were to get, you know, the A11 with animal rights equivalent to R110, I think the location where this is at, it may be an okay location for that. So right now, I would support just a regular continuance. Mr. Henley.
I would agree, and I think what worries me about just voting on it now is it may put us in a position where we're forcing the hand of the owner to come back with either departing entirely from this proposal or we're putting them into a corner where their proposal has to change to a zone where the density would be higher, which according to what I just heard Mr. Jones say and what I've heard from the public is not the right thing to do by the public, and the public has said that they are preferring you know, the three homes. So I think until we know for sure that the owners are not interested in a 3-home arrangement without horses, I don't want to paint anybody into a corner that forces an option that ends up with a worse outcome.
Is that a motion?
Yes, that's a motion.
I second it.
So can we clarify what is the motion?
The motion is to continue and wait for a report back from the property owners.
Excellent. Any discussion on that motion? I do want to go on the record and say I would actually prefer more houses on this from the perspective of our housing affordability crunch that we're currently in, but I also respect the wishes of the owners, and if the owners of the property want to put the 3 residences on it, I want to work with them as well. So I support that, the motion. Any other comments? Mr. Sewell.
And just kind of to piggyback on that, I'm a little uncomfortable giving off a signal that we feel like this has to be lower density than what would normally be allowed in residential zones in the area. So,
thank you. If there's no other comments, I will call for the vote. All in favor? And that is unanimous. Thank you to everyone who came to participate, and we look forward to hearing this item again. Okay, anyone here for item 7? 1, and that's about the housing needs, and those who are here for item 8. All right.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Can I just raise a concern? I understand the importance of showing support for what we're trying to do at the school board, but we are conducting the city's business, and people have come to express their feelings about that. So I'm a little personally uncomfortable with dismissing early when there's still business to be performed and people here to express their opinion about it. So I don't know, maybe as an alternative, 1 or 2 of us could maybe go to represent the council to that meeting, and if more time is needed, the rest of us could stay and do that.
I'm looking at the items, and since there was less public interest in 6 and 7, we may continue those for 2 weeks. I don't think anything is. Yeah, I'm just working up a proposal.
If you were to entertain, Mr. Sewell's proposal, then what I would suggest is continue with 8. And then come back to 6 and 7 afterwards if you have time, so as that the folks that have come to hear that issue aren't interrupted for a brief adjournment.
Okay. So unless there's objections, we will move forward on to item 8. And then after item 8, we will revisit whether we want to continue with items 6 and 7. So item 8 is an implied motion on an ordinance amending the zone map classification of approximately 7.37 acres of real property generally located at 1776 South Buckley Lane from public facilities to one-family residential planned development, R16 PD, Provost South neighborhood. And we will first hear from our planner, Mr. Yost. So, Mr. Yost, if you would just hold off for just one moment. Perhaps we need a little bit more of a council discussion on this question. We have about 15 minutes before we would need to leave if we want it to be the school board meeting in time for the public comment. So I will look to see if any council member wants to make a motion about how we use this last 15 minutes. Or we could have a discussion. So we have at least one that's one member that I believe is concerned about continuing items in order to meet that deadline. It sounds like we have another council member here that two that feel strongly they would. Three. Okay. So if those three chose to stand up and leave, we wouldn't have a quorum to finish the business either.
Well, I think we should stay on the agenda.
Yeah,
I agree.
For the agenda.
Yeah.
I'm supporting that. We need to do our business. If we can help the school district, great, but
okay,
we've got our business.
Okay, that addresses my concern, because we need to either give this our full attention or continue the item.
Okay. And particularly with the number of people that are here in the audience, I feel.
Number 8 is okay.
Okay.
Let's come back and do all thoroughly.
Okay. So you good if we move ahead? All right. We will continue on with item 8 and invite Mr. Yost back up.
Well, I was prepared to present in about 30 seconds, but now that we want to be thorough. As stated, the title of the item, this is a rezone of the former Utah County Jail site. In 2004, the property was deeded to Provo City. The site has been cleared of the former jail and offered for sale. And the applicant, Gardner & Associates, is currently under contract for the purchase of the site and has applied for this zone change. The proposed development accommodated by the zone map amendment is a 33-lot planned unit development of single-family homes. The applicant has proposed to develop this as an age-restricted or 55 and older community. The item was presented to Planning Commission and was heard in a neighborhood meeting earlier this year. And first in the neighborhood meeting, the majority of the respondents or attendants to the neighborhood meeting were in favor of the project. Actually, there wasn't any reported opposition to the project. There was some attendees that were disappointed in the age restriction proposed, but in general, the physical layout of the project and the product proposed was received positively. Planning Commission voted unanimously to forward a recommendation of approval to you as the municipal council, and the proposed development in this proposed zone adhere to the stated policies and future land use of the recently adopted Southeast Area Plan and of the General Plan, and specifically addresses stated needs for additional diverse types of housing and additional owner-occupied housing stock in the neighborhood. So with that unanimous recommendation from the Planning Commission and that brief description, I would ask if there's any questions for me.
Any questions for Mr. Yost? Thank you, Mr. Yost. We will now turn to the applicant, after which we will turn the time to the vice chair of the Provost South neighborhood.
My name is Dave Gardner. I'm the option holder on this property. This was originally a larger parcel, and we hope that in the near future we'll be able to acquire an additional 3 acres that is owned by the state that Provo City has a right to buy. But there's a title issue that's holding that up, and we felt like it was very important to get the project going. We don't want to lose an opportunity by waiting for the other property to come on board at the same time. So we've chosen to do it in 2 phases. The first phase is 33 lots. These are single-family detached homes, and they are 1 level with a full basement on all the homes. They range in size from our smallest of 1,420 square feet with the full basement under that, and then they go to roughly 1,800 square feet. So we'll be mixing up the sizes and hitting different price ranges. We did a market analysis of the 55 and older community and found that to be a very strong market right now. Not a lot of people doing that. And I had just finished the Trellis on the Green project on the very north end of 200 West, which was age restricted as well, and just had the feeling from ourselves that there was a big market out there, especially for something not quite as pricey. So that's our proposal. That's what we're asking for, is the zone change to R16 PD. Any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Gardner.
Sorry, yeah, I do have a question. So 55 plus, does that include marital status, or is that just an age thing?
It's an age thing.
Okay.
So if, in fact, I think the law reads that if one of them, if you have a husband and wife situation, if one of them is over 55, then they both qualify. So we didn't have too much of that in our other project, but I think our average age was close to 70.
And if this came up earlier in the work session today, if an older couple or a single person is taking in some grandchildren into the home?
Yeah, there's provisions.
Just has
that
to be
allow
the
that
owner. You're just asking for the owner to be 55 or older.
Right.
And they have to be occupied.
But there is a provision in the CCNRs that we've adopted on other projects that says that that's a short-term stay if it's grandchildren. You lose the right to have which I think is not a bad idea. You lose the right to have your grandchildren continuously living with you. You don't want that, right? Good idea for the Yeah. So anyway, the restrictions that we have to follow are according to state law, and a lot of those relate back to federal law. So the CCNRs are detailed, and I don't want to talk off the top of my head on some of this stuff, but basically almost every aspect of that type of living has been addressed somewhere in the court systems.
Could it be rented to someone that's 55 and older?
Yes, but not someone who's under 55.
Okay.
So yeah, the owner could buy the unit and they would have the right to rent, but they would have to meet the same requirements as in leasing it as we would in selling it.
Thank you. Any other questions from the council? All right, we will turn the time over to which vice chair? What's her last name? Ms. Raybeck.
Hi, my name is Ashley Rayback. I am Vice Chair of the Provost South neighborhood, and there are several of us, but Vicki asked me to come and present. So when we had this neighborhood meeting, it was pretty much overwhelmingly in favor. Everybody was excited about it, interested in it. There were some people who were, their opposition to it was that the exclusion of the age difference. That was and it used to have, the developer had originally thought to include a ratio of 20% family homes with 80% 55 and older, but after the discussion of there being marital status issues, he changed it to 100% 55 and over, and anyone married or single can move there now. As far as history of the neighborhood with this, a A couple years ago, we were offered that they could put on townhomes, about 140 of them. And when we had the neighborhood meeting, it was overwhelmingly against it. Everyone hated that idea. And so they came up with a different proposal, and lots of voting. And what came of that was that almost everyone, it was like 90%, wanted single-family homes. Now, ideally, we wanted large single-family homes where you could have, you know, a bigger family, because just having a single detached family home with 1 or 2 bedrooms can often lead to just small rentals and overturning, and we didn't want just 133 tiny little single family homes. We wanted something with some stability. So when I was reading in your letter, Mr. Harding, you said there's some irony that neighbors who have lamented the loss of young children in their schools and neighborhood due to some demographic shifts in the area are supporting a large development that would be restricted to the 55 plus crowd. I'd like to address that right now. The issue is not necessarily the 55 plus or whatever. We want stability in the neighborhood, and we would love to have families in the neighborhood. The problem with having tiny little houses is they become rentals. And when you have, at least that's how it goes in our neighborhood. And so when you have a tiny little rental, you have a young family or singles or whoever moves in, and if they're renting, then they just leave or whatever. If they're a young family, they have maybe 1 or 2 kids. With only 1 or 2 bedrooms, you can have, you know, just a couple little kids, and then by then you move out. So when your kids get a little older, you want a bigger place, and so you leave. So what that leaves the neighborhood with is a whole bunch of tiny little rentals that people are not necessarily, you know, staying in, and it's not helping the school or the family community that the neighborhood has said they overwhelmingly want. So when we were sent the proposal for Mr. Gardner, we were given the option of much lower density than the 140 townhomes. There will be an HOA, and it will have nice manicured homes. He took several of us to go and look at like what the style he was looking at. They were nice homes. The buyers make them look nice. The street's not overwhelming parking. And so it's like what you said earlier, Mr. Harding. Sometimes you take the best option you're given. In 2 years, no one has offered, and it looks like it's not an option to have very large single-family homes like in a lot of the rest of the neighborhood because of the cost of tearing down the jail. And so we're hoping that going with a reputable builder who will build nice homes will be a good option for us. In addition, at the meeting where we had Mr. Gardner come and present, there were several people who are current members of the neighborhood who were actually interested in buying into it as residents for themselves when they get older, or also for their aging parents. So there were several interested people who actually currently live in the neighborhood or who wanted to bring parents in. So it was kind of a nice thing for them as well. So as far as the neighborhood goes, it seems like at the meeting, most people were really happy with what we had been offered. Like I said, we wish we were having very large, we wish we had the discussion of just 3 large homes like we had earlier, but because of the cost of the land, we understand that we want stability, and it seems like this is going to be a stable option for us, for the neighborhood. That's all.
Thank you. I apologize for smiling. I heard a comment when you said we'd love to have the option of 3 large horses. There was
I didn't mean horses. I meant horses. I mean, sure.
Yeah, sorry, 3 large houses, and the
And
comment
houses.
was, would you take them if they came with horses? So
Yes.
that's why I smiled. I
We'll
apologize.
take the horses. I mean, come on. It's fine.
All right. Thank you for your thorough report.
Okay.
And with that, we will open this up to the general public for public comment. And again, a reminder, please state your name when you first come up and limit your comments to 2 minutes.
Council members, city staff, my name is John Amadio. I live at 2103 South Mountain Vista Lane, which is directly west of this proposal. And I'm in favor of it being approved. Where I live right now, I have 2/3 of an acre, and I can barely walk to the back of that property anymore. smaller properties like this is what people like me need. I can't take care of what I have now. And most of you are aware or should be aware of the new Vista housing proposal that David Hall has had in the works for quite some time. The area on this east side of this property down below it, below State Street, is approximately 30 acres. And he owns all but 4 of those houses. And his plan is to have upwards of 20,000 people be able to live in that area. It's all modern and all that kind of stuff, and it's a little ways away, but it will take care of a lot of the single individuals and small family situations. We want to stay in the area. We want to stay in that neighborhood, and we've looked at places all over the valley here, and their prices are close to $500,000 when you get everything. And of course, they have swimming pools and all that kind of stuff. I don't swim. I don't need a swimming pool. And this is a practical thing, and as far as I can tell, it's within our financial capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Adam Arnett. I want to say that I believe that the nature of support in the neighborhood is a little bit mischaracterized, and I don't believe a lot of what Dave Gardner shared in the Planning Commission meeting. So I wanted to come and talk about that. The plan is beautiful. I actually like it. The one big concern that we saw was like the width of the street. And I don't know if that's been addressed since, but it wasn't going to stop anyone from saying this isn't a good thing. When this was proposed, it was proposed as an 80-20 split. 80% 55 and older, 20% available to the general public. There were a lot of people that expressed interest in purchasing there. I've been pro for 10 years in this neighborhood. For 8 of those, sorry, a little emotional on it. I raised my hand and said, I think it's beautiful. I could settle here. I said, is that available for everyone? Can I live here in the 20%? He said, well, yeah, you bring your family and have a good time. I said, I'm actually single. That's not going to be an issue, is it? And throughout the meeting, repeatedly with our neighborhood chair, vice chairs, and our city councilman, Dave Connect, he said, I will not sell to you specifically because of your marital status. I was a little taken aback by that because that's pretty blatant and frank. The rest of the meeting went on for a little while, and then I raised my hand again and said, I'm sorry, I think I may have misunderstood what was said. I said, I think it's an attractive neighborhood. I would like to purchase. Is that going to be available for me? He said, no, because you are single, specifically because of that reason. And there was a lot of uproar because of that. And as a 55 and older community as it stands alone, I think it's great. I think it's great. Side conversation that Dave Connect and I had with the developer immediately following that meeting. I said, help me understand. I contribute to the community. I help out at elementary schools with their field days. I help out at high schools. Where am I disqualified to be among a 20%? At that point, he said, look, I don't want your type here. He goes, but I sense that there's potential litigation here. And so in front of our city councilman, he says to me, I won't sell to you because you're single, but you can bet yourself that I'll find any other reason to not sell to you or anyone like you. So it's not that I don't like this development, I just don't trust the developer, especially in this instance. And when we're talking about a 55 and older community, we're talking about a vulnerable population.
So
We've talked about a gentleman that'll discriminate.
If you can wrap up.
And I don't believe that we should be doing business with people who will willfully, in front of elected officials, subvert the law.
Thank you. Any other public comment? So with that, we will close the public comment portion and return it to the council for discussion. Mr. Connect.
Yeah. So I think there are different perceptions and memories of things that went on in that meeting, and I don't think anyone remembers it verbatim. I certainly don't remember all the things that you remember, Adam, but that's okay. And I don't know that we need to elaborate on the fact that the developer has the right to develop this as he sees fit. And he has made the choice to go to 100% rather than the 80-20. And I can't pretend to know all the reasons for things happening the way they have. But I would say that it was not quite as portrayed, but pretty close. I mean, there was, I don't know that it was all about being single, but I don't want to put words in the mouth of the developer, and I just would like to say that I don't remember it quite that way.
Any other discussion? Mr. Sewell.
So I can't really comment on that last exchange there, and I wasn't there, but I do want to say that as Ms. Rayback mentioned, this is a bird in hand with a reputable developer, and everything I've heard about Dave Gardner, who has built many projects, is that he does good work. So what's been put before us is a age-restricted development. Seems to be good support from the neighborhood. I know for sure there's a need for that. We have a senior development next to where I live that is selling very quickly, high demand for it. So I'm sure you'll find plenty of customers, and I'm in favor of the project.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. I guess I'd like to chime in a little bit. I am saddened by the rift that's in our community, and this is just the latest item that brings this rift to the forefront. This has been brewing for a long time. There's going to be no quick resolution. I guess I just ask everyone in the community to be considerate of others, and to be kind and really just considerate of people in other life stations. Specifically for this project, I like. There's many aspects to like about it. More broadly, I feel that communities are best, are most vibrant when we don't segregate. And this is just a 33 unit, so it's smaller than some projects. But I know my life and the life of my family has been greatly enriched by interacting with people in all life stages and lots of different experiences. And I've appreciated the surrogate grandmothers that live next door. And so I'm grateful for the variety that I've been blessed with. And so, whether any time, and those of the who have served with me on different committees and whatnot know that this isn't just for 55 and plus, but I generally advocate for as much mixing as possible throughout our communities. And so my understanding is, this is fully legal. This is something that the federal government allows. But just in general, I would prefer not. I'd prefer to have our residents mixed throughout the community. But I understand that my ideal is not everyone's ideal, and there is a market for communities that exclude people that are younger than 55. So I think I'm just rambling now, so I will close my comments.
Yeah, I like the project. I think it's a valuable contribution. I think it's probably a good use for that particular piece of property. I don't have an opinion about the reputed conversation that happened since I wasn't there. I wasn't present at the Planning Commission, although I heard comments about it. And all I would say to Mr. Gardner is that I certainly hope that as a developer, and trust that as a developer in our community, you are committed to building our community in the best way possible. And we all have to work together in the city to make sure that we are not making people feel excluded on the basis of religion or marital status or any other reason. And so I don't hold any of those things against this project. I think this project's a worthy one, but I hope that maybe echoing what Mr. Harding said, that anybody and everybody who's involved in these rifts in our community are doing their best to heal those divisions. So thanks.
So I'll call one last time for comments, but we do have an implied motion that we'll be voting on in just one moment. Mr. Connect.
So when we did the Southeast Area Plan, which wasn't too long ago, and included all three neighborhoods in the Southeast, which is Spring Creek, Provost, Provost South, it came to our attention, even though there was nobody on the committee selected by community development, and I don't fault them because they just picked people that came to an open house and said they wanted to be on the committee, and so they formed a committee. And we found out later that there were a number and a significant number of young single professionals in the neighborhood that were not being represented or not on the committee. And at that time, there was some enforcement going on, and so they wrote a letter saying, gee, we think this isn't fair. We knew the law when we moved in, but we were told the law would never be enforced. And this, this was very uncomfortable, and uncomfortable because the law was clear on the definition of family, of 3 singles or a family. And so the outcome of that a couple years since is we do have a proposal coming up to change the definition of family, if not citywide, then just in certain projects within the Provost and Provost South neighborhood. But in that process of listening to this, the committee was not turning a deaf ear, because it was recommended that 50 acres of undeveloped property in the Southeast be rezoned and set aside, and that the word go out to developers that we wanted projects that would meet the needs of the young single professionals that want to live in this part of town. And so we do have 50 acres set aside, which is probably the largest area, well, certainly in Southeast Provo, and it's the only area I know of in any city in Utah where we are specifically asking developers to build for a certain demographic. And now, just doing that, one might say if you only meet the needs of one demographic, we are being a little exclusionary there. But when you look at the overall picture of what's going on in Provo, we do have a variety of housing, and I think that's what we're looking at here with the jail, is providing a variety of housing for different life stages and different groups, and the market is there for the 55 and older community. And I think we have a pretty good balance of single-family homes and condos and townhomes. There's a really huge variety of things, not just in Provo, but in Southeast Provo. And so I just wanted to point out that we are trying to meet the needs of the young single professionals. I'm not sure what will happen with their proposal to change the family definition. That has yet to be seen. But that's probably all I've got to say. I do favor this project. I think it has merit.
Thank you, Mr. Connect. Mr. Stewart.
I'll be voting in favor of this proposal. Dave Gardner, even though the one prior that he brought to us I wasn't too excited about, his major developments he's had have always been wonderful for the city. I just trust him as a developer. He'll do a great job for the city, for the residents, and for the neighborhood. So I'll be voting for this.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Mr. Sewell?
Just one more comment, again, without getting into the specifics of anything that was said or alleged to have been said. But as I think about our city and kind of look across the nation, I feel like there's too much of us against them and tribalism, and too little of seeking to understand people who are in different circumstances. And so, again, without commenting on anything specific related to what was said, I just wanted to echo what some of my colleagues have said, kind of a hope that we will strive to be inclusive and understanding of those who are in a different life circumstance from us, or are different in some way from us. And that's an earnest hope that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Sewell. Any other comments before we vote? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote on the implied motion. All in favor? Any opposed? That was unanimous. Mr. Jones, did you have a thought?
I was going to point out that since this was a first hearing, it's technically required to ask if anybody wants to continue it. But since the vote was unanimous, it seems pretty clear that nobody did.
Thank you. That's a good point. Mr. Connect just pointed out that was not unanimous because we are missing Mr.
Unanimous with Mr. Winterton excused.
Yes, he is excused. Thank you. Unanimous with one excuse. Thank you. All right, we'll make it through the night some way. All right, item number 6 is an implied motion. Actually, before we move to that, Mr. Strachan, do we have any update?
Yes, as of about 10 minutes ago, maybe 20 minutes ago, Mr. Winterton reported that the public comment period wouldn't start for about 30 minutes. So I think if you were adjourning soon, you might still be able to get over there and participate in that. He hasn't reported that it started yet. The question I would have for you is whether or not the discussion on item number 7 will take a long time or not. The item number 2 will take about a minute or two, I would think.
Yeah. My gauge of the prevailing wind is that 7 will not take too long. So let's move to that, because I believe we have one in the audience who wanted to. All right. We will move to number 6, an implied motion on a resolution appointing Hannah Sazel as policy analyst for the Provo City Municipal Council office, and Mr. Strachan will be leading this item.
Council members, you've all met Hannah Sazel. She started work earlier this week. I just wanted to get her on camera, so for the public record. But Hannah is a Utah native from Highland. She just graduated a year ago. a few months ago from BYU with an MPA. Like Wayne Parker, she got a BA in history and an MPA from BYU, so that seat's yours eventually. Anyway, we're glad to have her. She's very accomplished, very good references, and she spent about the last year interning for the LDS Church in their public affairs and government relations shop. So it's our recommendation from the hiring committee and as the executive director that you approve this resolution, please.
Thank you. So we will open up the public comment, which Ms. Sazal could participate in if she would like. And she's turning that down. Anyone else? All right, we will close that. And is there any discussion before we vote? Then let's vote on the implied motion of the resolution appointing Ms. Sazal as our policy analyst. All in favor? And that is unanimous with Mr. Gary Winterton excused. And final item of the evening is item 7, an implied motion on a resolution regarding a pledge of support and to identify measures to be taken to address Utah's housing needs across the state and in Provo City. Hey, my name just appeared again. Awesome. It looks like I will be presenting this item. Do we have the proposed resolution that we can show up on the screen? We had a robust discussion about this in the Housing Committee. And I wasn't quite sure where it was going to go, but after some discussion, there was a great suggestion by striking just a few words that were causing consternation that the Housing Committee could give a full supportive recommendation. And that is what was brought to the council, and we discussed this in an earlier work session. For the public's benefit, the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, which actually serves as the state chamber, is requesting that all communities across the state adopt this resolution with these measures, these commitments. Provo City, we feel like Provo City is already leading the way on just about all of these. There were just a couple concerns about impact fees and zoning, so we struck those so we could full-heartedly support this, and then we will take a look at the others as well. But these are the things that we felt like we were willing to fully commit to, and we are hopeful that as we join with other communities throughout the state in implementing these measures, that we will have a measurable impact on the affordability of housing in our state. So I guess that's the presentation, and are there any questions among the council for the presenter? Mr. Handley.
Yeah, I actually do have a question, and it's not gonna derail this in my mind, but you know, we had some reservations about impact fees being mentioned in the resolution, and after reading the report that was attached to this, so I think it's the Gardner Business Review thing, or no, maybe it was, yeah, it's that one.
Kim Gardner.
There's quite a trend of extraordinarily high rises in impact fees that are disproportionate, and it just would be something maybe as a footnote for further conversation in our city. I don't know, and maybe somebody on the council knows more about that, but it seems to me like we ought to be sure that those aren't out of control. According to the study, statewide, they're a real problem, and that's why I think they were in there originally.
Well, it'd be nice if we had a committee that was spending months to study the magnitude of impact fees. Mr. Van Buren, would you like to respond to that?
Yes. That study has been going on for months. It's about ready to present to the council. Impact fees are very much regulated by the government, and to raise impact fees, you have to justify all of them, and we've hired Wayne, who? What was her name?
I could have told you if you hadn't asked me.
I know, that's just how I am. Anyway, Zions Bank Public
Susie
Finance has
Becker.
been in.
Susie Becker.
Susie Becker has helped us with that, and we've studied every impact fee that the city can charge, and we've tried to, of course, most departments are interested in creating revenue as they can, because they need it. We all know that. But also it has to be justified. And so that'd be, but they are, I mean, I don't need to let the cat out of the bag, but they're all gonna go up, proposed to go up. So that's a real struggle. How do we do this and do that too? And we've got to find a safe solution, probably.
In my understanding, that committee will be presenting, these are the fees that are justifiable to charge. And I do think that the council will have that policy discussion of, do we want to charge what it's costing, or do we want to have them lower? We can't go higher by state law, but we could go lower. So that, I think, is a policy discussion we could have. But I personally don't feel comfortable committing to any policy at this moment. Mr. Van Buren.
And I'm probably going to be voting against this resolution because of some of those issues that we maybe took impact fees out of them, but we have review and reform existing practices that would negatively impact housing. So we've just kind of stated them a little different, made them a little more general. And of course, I have a hard time with these resolutions where we join someone else that can use our support in a lot of general ways and then specify them. And so I'll probably be voting against this.
Thank you. At this point, we will open it up to our public and appreciate their patience.
Beth Alligood, Lakeview North neighborhood resident. Okay. I'm just going to read what I wrote first, and then I'll talk more. Provo already has 80% of Utah County's subsidized housing. 30% of our population is students. We have one of the lowest median incomes in the valley, and our disposable income rate is also low. This has already hurt us economically, as retailers have seen the low median income, disposable income, and chosen to build elsewhere. While affordable housing is a serious issue, we should carefully consider what promises and obligations we put our city under and its residents under, and how it will affect us. We have our share of the burden. The West Side Master Planning Committee has seriously looked at this issue as we've been planning our land use and continue planning forward. We have development policies for the West Side already in place that addresses many of these measures. We are already doing most of what these measures are asking for. Allowing our autonomy to do what is best for our city to be compromised does not seem like a wise decision. It's time for other cities in Utah Valley to step up and share in helping on this issue. As a friend of mine said to me, they don't want to see Provo become the West Valley of Utah Valley. As you said already, we are leading the way in this. On the West Side Planning Committee, we have talked about affordable housing. We've talked about density in appropriate places, about maintaining natures of the characteristics of the natures of the neighborhoods while still allowing for housing variety so people can come in and move into Provo. If we wait for things that are coming, like the impact fee study, the master plan is coming to Planning Commission tomorrow, and so you should be seeing it in 2 weeks. And that is still moving forward. The body and language of that plan will be coming out later after the land use plan is out. We are leading in this. And I don't think giving our autonomy to have other communities dictate to us what we should do with our city is a good idea. We are carefully considering it. I just feel like just giving up the autonomy is just something that I have a really hard time doing. And I hope that you guys will seriously consider the best needs of our city and not just what's good for everybody else.
Thank you, Mrs. Alligood. Any other public comment? All right, we will close that. Mr. Connect.
Yes. So appreciate the diligence of staying and commenting at this. Well, it's not so late, but you're not too many people left in the audience. Housing affordability is a broad topic, and at this point in frankly, everywhere in the country, not just in Provo, housing affordability is an issue and a problem. And it's not just for low-income families. It's for virtually anyone except the really rich. when you look at 30% of someone's income, and you shouldn't go above that, and many people are paying 40 or 50% of their income, that's a problem. And housing, whether you're trying to buy a house or rent a house, I haven't seen or heard of anything hardly, except one project that's going up in Orem along the freeway where the developer decided, possibly because he got the property so cheap by the freeway, that he was going to offer condos to buy, and they're as low as 180. But that's the rare exception. Things in Provo, it's a tight housing market, a lot of demand, a lot of investors, and the more investors there are, or customers trying to buy a property, it just drives that property up, and things sell very quickly. So to me, this is not just about low and moderate income, affordable housing, because nothing's affordable. Everything's a problem. And we have done our best. I would say we can still do better, but we have done more than most any community in this valley to provide housing opportunities, different zoning options, and provide for the needs of our citizens. So I don't think we're committing to anything here that we're not already doing or willing to do. And that's important. We should not be committing to something that we either can't deliver or don't want to deliver. And those portions that we took out that were problematic were taken out for good reason, and I feel good about what's left.
Thank you, Mr. Connect. Mr. Hendley?
Yeah, I think maybe in response to Beth's comments, when we talked about this in our previous work meeting, I'm not aware of any reason that this compromises our autonomy. And actually, I think what we felt was that this would be, I mean, it is largely a symbolic act, but the symbolism is pretty important because of what it will do to the other communities in the valley to follow our lead. And I mean, maybe to put it most crassly, I think it puts a little pressure on our neighbors to say, it's time to step it up. We've signed this. How are you going to sign it? So I think that's the spirit of what this thing is about and why I'm supportive of it.
Thank you, Mr. Hendley. Any other comments? Let me jump in and just echo. I don't see this as a binding, but we are giving our commitment, and so I do take this seriously. But at the same time, if something is not in the best interest of Provo, I don't feel like this, binds us to do that. And then I would flip it around. If we choose not to sign it, I think other cities in the valley will say, well, hey, don't ask us to sign it because Provo didn't sign it. And so I think by signing it, it does encourage everyone to do their part. And I think that's a good thing for the state, and I think that's a very good thing for Provo directly. Was there a comment, Mr. Parker? Oh, I thought, okay. Mr. Van Buren, did you want to talk about anything more on that? Okay. Mr. Sewell.
I have really mixed feelings about this. When I first read it, there was a lot of language in there that I wasn't sure exactly what it meant. I definitely liked the changes that were made, but like even in the first sentence there, we're committed to ensuring housing affordability is attainable for all Utah residents, and I'm not sure how that's defined or exactly what that means, and so I don't know. I'm really torn on this. I think maybe I'm not ready to vote for it at this point, but I support the intent, but that's kind of where I'm at. So
I would be open if the council wanted to bring this back and take another hash at it. It did go through a committee, and then it did get presented to the whole council. But if that would be valuable, I don't think there's I don't believe it's super urgent. So if we want to take it back and maybe make a couple other changes, I think if it's possible, to get as close as possible to a unanimous vote. I think that's helpful when passing these type of message resolutions. So anyway, but I'd be interested on what others think.
Well, maybe in light of the absence of Gary Winterton, I would lean in that direction.
I'll second his move.
And I move to continue.
Excellent. We have a motion to continue this item. Any comment on that motion?
Well, I just wanted to comment. That one word, we are committed to ensuring housing affordability. Now that in itself is a big statement, commitment, and I'm not sure how we actually accomplish ensuring that everyone, that it's affordable for everyone. That's a great goal, a great vision, but to say that we're going to for sure make it happen, that might be a little bit beyond our ability.
Okay, great.
So I'm in favor of continuing, and for that matter, we might want to look carefully at a few of the words.
I'd feel much better about supporting it if we take that out. I dislike that word also. I agree with Kay. It could be used against us.
All right, so we have a motion to continue, a second, and if this passes, look to at least hope someone will step up and take the lead on recommending some changes. But in the meantime, let us vote on the motion. All in favor? All opposed? And that is 5 in favor, Mr. Stewart, Mr. Sewell, Mr. Handley, Mr. Harding, Mr. Connect, and opposed is Mr. Van Buren with Mr. Winterton excused. We just had an update that the public comment portion is starting now at the the school board meeting, and we have come to the end of our agenda. So unless there is an objection, we will adjourn by unanimous consent.